we've been doing a lot of work on the project side of things with Griptape nodes to make it really easy for you to integrate projects into the rest of your pipeline. So as you see here, we really want you to be able to say, all right, let's use Griptape nodes, and inputs and outputs will go into the right place regardless of what your hierarchy is. And there's a lot of control in here and customization. So projects allow you to organize your inputs and your outputs automatically. They allow you to define directories for a particular project, and those directories use a macro language to determine where they sit on disk. They use variables, which allow you to substitute in various things based off of what you need given the situation. And then the situations themselves are reusable recipes. So for example, here on the left, you can see I've got a list of directories that are available for a project, and I've got inputs, for example, which reflects a inputs directory on disk. And in this case, what we said is inputs is basically wherever my workflow file is /inputs. So whatever workflow file I've got and whatever hierarchy I have. For example, if my project is, volumes, projects, the long whistle, assets, characters, SADI, and then there's the workflow file in there. All of my inputs and outputs will be over here as opposed to some massive list of all of the inputs and outputs that's at the base level. And yeah, here you can see again, outputs go to outputs. So we're trying to make this really clear. And then the situations themselves are things that happen when nodes run or when you add items to your workflow. So for example, in this case, I've got a save node output situation. So anytime you run a node that's going to generate any kind of output, it's going to then put things in the outputs folder, wherever that happens to be, inside a file extensions directory like text or images or videos or something like that, which is all totally customizable as well. Then any subdirectories, a file name base with a version number, and then the file extension. So just to show you how that all comes together, here you can see I've got a workflow with Seedream, and over on the right-hand side is a list of what shows up on disk. And so you'll notice right in here, I just dragged a file from my downloads folder into my workflow. And what it did is it created an inputs folder and then the name of the image in inputs. And this allows us to make sure that we're not referencing files that are outside the project structure. So you don't run things where you throw things on the farm and everything breaks. We have a default situation that says if I grab something from externally and outside my project, copy it there, or if I download a URL, it's going to go there. Things like that, just to make it really clear that all this stuff is contained. We'll go ahead and add another image. So here's this other character, and again, that puts that in inputs/images. If I go ahead and connect these now into Seedream, that's going to output a file called dog.png, and when I run it, you'll notice it automatically creates outputs dog version 0 PNG. So the whole point of this being that it is automatically versioning things and creating them in the right location. So we want to remove the person from this, so we change the prompt, we run it again, and now we get dog version 1. So again, everything is just happening automatically and organizing stuff as I work. So now let's go ahead and do some video. So I'll choose the Gemini Omni Flash. We'll create that and say, slowly pull the camera back as the dog lays down and puts its head in its paws, and the dog will wag its tail. We're going to name it dog laying down. It automatically creates a videos file and then names that. I can look at the output here and say, you know what, it's animated on 1s and I want it on 2s. So let's go ahead and modify that. We'll use a hold frames node, change the name of the output file. And again, it automatically names things with the correct version number and puts it in the right location. I can make an adjustment. So now we're going to say, make it on 4s instead of on 2s. It names that as version 2. And then I can say, you know what, I actually want this to be on 3s because I think that's going to look a bit better. So I'll set that to 3s. It creates the new version over there. Again, I'm just working away as I normally would in the canvas over here, but everything is automatically organized on disk. And so that's a big focus for us, is to make sure that you can set this up properly for your studio, and then the artist can just work away as they want to. So the project we come with a good default project, which is what you were just seeing there, but obviously you need to be able to organize this and customize it yourself. So projects can inherit from one another. You have full customization of various situations and variables and directories, and you can handle multiple operating systems and even pin libraries if you would like to. So in this case, for example, I have different variants of a particular character, all going to be saved in the same location, all with different workflow files. And then each of the outputs is named based off of the variant. So we have the workflow name, for example, for driver variant base, That's going to go in outputs, driver variant base, images and videos, etc. Driver variant oily goes in outputs, driver variant oily, images and videos, and driver variant wet goes in driver variant wet, images and videos. So again, just another simple method to be able to organize all of your files and folders. Where this starts to get really exciting is when you want to share information with other artists on your team and you're using like shared file storage. So in this case, we iterated a bunch to get this prompt for this particular character, and I want to make it available, but I didn't want to go ahead and publish it to like Shockrate or something like that, or Autodesk Flow. I just wanted to be able to have it running locally, or have it available locally in the file system. So in the project management system, if I go and I look at this project, you can see I've got prompts, assets, and publish as different directories that have been created. And so now if I go and say I want to save this text, I can say I want to save the text, and then I've got a situation called save prompt. And so this is a custom situation I created that will always save into the prompts folder. I can name it whatever I want, which is going to be 80s photographer. And then later, another artist can come in and say, I need to load some text. They click on the file over there, and then you'll notice over on the sidebar, there is prompts, assets, and publish as directories they can go to. So they click directly on that, and it takes them to the proper location without them having to know. And then when they load it, it will load in that particular prompt. And it keeps that variable system in here so that if they move this to another location on disk, or we change where prompts exist, it'll still load all of the correct files. And that variable system goes across all text input nodes, so they can use that throughout the entire project if they want. And you can see now I get this guy, which is great. Here's another example where we wanted to publish files, and so we've got 30 or 40 iterations on a particular character until we get what we want. So we created that publish folder as just a place to go like, hey, you know what, this is great. Let's store this for later so other people have access without having to, again, go to a full asset management system. You just save stuff to disk really easily. And so I'm using the save image node, and I want to publish it as driver model sheet, and it will publish it there. This is just a demonstration of project hierarchy and multiple operating systems. So we have our SIGGRAPH 2026 project hierarchy, and you can see that we've got different workspace directories, which is where all of the workflow files are going to go. Different ones depending on the operating system. And then the libraries themselves are in an environment variable, which is on disk on my local machine. So we can have the libraries that were being used in a different location than the workflow files, which can also be in a different location than the project definition file, which is that YAML file down below. So lots of customizability and flexibility in here. And then you can see we have a child project which inherits from SIGGRAPH 2026 and then allows me to have different overrides and things as I need, depending on what I would like this child project to do. Which allows us, of course, to have multiple projects open with people working together regardless of whatever operating system they happen to be on. On the left, you can see this is using a Mac, and on the right is on Windows. Both of them are using the new diffuser library with ZImage and Allura, and they can work wherever they want, and all the files are going to be going into the same location. It's just shared storage.